Jason stepped into the sleek, modern car dealership, his eyes lighting up as he admired the luxury vehicles. He was just 16, but he had grown up around cars, fascinated by their craftsmanship and power. Wearing a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, he didn't look like the typical customer, but that didn't dampen his excitement as he ran his fingers along the polished hood of a black sports car. A sharp voice cut through the showroom. "Can I help you?" A salesman, a middle-aged man with slicked back hair and a forced smile, approached. Jason turned with a polite nod. "Yeah, I wanted to check out some cars." "Maybe take a look inside." The salesman's smile faded. He glanced Jason up and down, his lips twisting in disapproval. "We don't let people just sit in these cars unless they're serious buyers." Jason's stomach tightened. "I just wanted to see, do you even have an appointment?" The salesman interrupted, his voice growing harsher. Jason hesitated. "No, but, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the salesman said firmly. He looked toward the security guard standing near the entrance. Jason felt heat rise to his face as the security guard stepped forward. Other customers were starting to glance in his direction. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," Jason said, his voice steady but hurt. "You're wasting our time, kid," the salesman sneered. "This isn't a place for window shopping." Jason clenched his fists but didn't argue. He knew how these situations played out. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his heart pounding with anger and humiliation, but as he stepped outside, he pulled out his phone and sent a single message. Tomorrow would be different. Jason walked down the street, his mind racing. He had been humiliated before, but something about today felt different. Maybe it was the way the salesman had sneered at him. Maybe it was the way the security guard had stepped in so quickly, as if he was some kind of threat. As he reached the bus stop, he pulled out his phone and dialed the one person who would understand. His mother. It rang once. Twice. Then a calm, confident voice answered. "Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Jason hesitated. He didn't like complaining. His mother, Olivia Carter, was one of the most powerful business women in the country. A self-made billionaire, she had built her empire from the ground up. She had taught Jason to stay strong, to work hard, and to never let anyone define his worth. But today stung. "I just got kicked out of a dealership," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Silence. "Then, what happened?" Jason took a deep breath and explained. How the salesman had judged him before he even spoke. How they had treated him like he didn't belong. How they had pushed him out like he was nothing. His mother didn't interrupt. She just listened. When he finished, there was a pause. Then, Olivia's voice came through, smooth but sharp. "Which dealership?" Jason told her. "All right," she said, her tone unreadable. "Tomorrow, we're going back." Jason's heart pounded. "Mom, you don't have to." "I know," Olivia said. "But I want to." Jason exhaled, relief washing over him. If there was one thing he knew about his mother, it was this: when Olivia Carter made up her mind, no one could stop her. Tomorrow was going to be a day they would never forget. The next morning, Jason woke up to the sound of his mother's voice. "Get dressed, sweetheart. We have somewhere to be." He sat up, his mind still groggy from sleep. Then, it all came rushing back. The dealership. The humiliation. His mother's promise. Jason pulled on a crisp button-down shirt and a pair of designer sneakers, nothing too flashy, but enough to make a statement. When he walked downstairs, Olivia was already waiting, dressed in an elegant black suit, her presence commanding as always. She sipped her coffee and glanced at him. "Ready?" Jason nodded, but he couldn't shake the nervous energy buzzing in his chest. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Olivia smiled, setting her cup down. "Jason, when someone disrespects you, you have two choices. You can walk away and let them think they were right, or you can remind them exactly who you are." Jason swallowed. "And what's the plan?" Olivia's eyes glinted. "You'll see." They stepped outside, and Jason's breath caught. Parked in front of the house was one of the rarest, most expensive cars in the world, his mother's Rolls-Royce Phantom, custom-designed, sleek, and gleaming in the morning sun. As the chauffeur opened the door, Olivia gestured for Jason to get in. "Today, we're making an entrance." Jason slid into the luxurious leather seat, his nerves fading into something else, anticipation. The moment the car pulled out of the driveway, he knew one thing for sure, that dealership wasn't ready for what was coming. As the Rolls-Royce Phantom cruised through the city streets, Jason watched the world outside with a mix of excitement and nerves. He had never arrived anywhere in this car before. His mother usually reserved it for business meetings with high-profile executives or charity galas. Today, however, was different. Olivia sat beside him, calm and composed, scrolling through emails on her phone. But Jason knew better. She was just as ready for this as he was. "Mom," Jason said hesitantly, "what exactly are we going to do when we get there?" Olivia glanced at him with a knowing smile. "We're going to let them correct their mistake." Jason exhaled slowly. He knew his mother was powerful, but he had no idea how this would play out. As the car neared the dealership, heads started turning. Pedestrians stopped to admire the sleek Rolls-Royce, its deep midnight blue paint reflecting the morning sunlight. Even other luxury car owners couldn't help but steal glances. The moment they pulled into the dealership's parking lot, the effect was immediate. Salespeople, customers, and even the manager, Greg Thompson, all turned their attention to the car as it rolled to a stop right in front of the glass doors. The chauffeur stepped out first, walking to Jason's side to open the door. Jason took a deep breath and stepped out onto the pavement, feeling all eyes on him. A moment later, Olivia followed, her heels clicking sharply against the ground. Inside the showroom, the same salesman who had humiliated Jason yesterday, Mark, stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Jason looked up at his mother. She adjusted the cuffs of her tailored blazer and then locked eyes with the dealership staff. "Now," she said, her voice smooth but firm, "let's get down to business." The showroom was silent. Every employee, every customer, every set of eyes was locked onto Olivia and Jason. The Rolls-Royce Phantom outside was still idling, its presence alone exuding power and prestige. Greg Thompson, the dealership manager, was the first to react. He smoothed his tie and stepped forward with a forced smile. "Good morning. Welcome to our dealership. How can we assist you today?" Jason folded his arms, glancing at Mark, the same salesman who had kicked him out the day before. Mark looked pale, his confidence from yesterday completely gone. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Yesterday, when my son came in, he was told to leave. Apparently, he didn't belong here." She turned to Mark, who was already breaking into a nervous sweat. "Do you remember that?" Mark swallowed hard. Greg immediately shot a sharp look at Mark. "Is this true?" Olivia didn't wait for an answer. "I own multiple businesses, and I've purchased luxury cars from high-end dealerships across the country. Never have I seen such blatant disrespect. You judged my son based on his appearance, assuming he wasn't worth your time." Mark stammered, I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a mistake." Olivia cut in, her voice calm but authoritative. "A mistake that cost you a very valuable customer." The tension in the room was thick. Other customers whispered among themselves, and a few even pulled out their phones to record. Greg cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Carter, we sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. Please, allow us to make this right." Jason spoke up for the first time. "Funny. Yesterday, I wasn't even allowed to step inside, and now you want to make things right?" Mark looked at the ground knowing he had no excuse. Olivia smiled coolly. "Let's see how you plan to fix this." Greg knew they were in trouble. A billionaire's fury was not something a business like his could afford to ignore. He forced another smile. "Mrs. Carter, we deeply regret this situation. Please, allow us to offer a sincere apology and discuss how we can make things right." Olivia crossed her arms. "Make things right? You humiliated my son in front of your staff and customers. You assumed he wasn't worthy of being here. Now, because I show up in a Rolls-Royce, suddenly, you're interested? The tension was unbearable. Customers whispered among themselves. Some were recording, their phones subtly raised. Greg shot Mark a furious glance. You should have treated every customer with respect, no matter what. Mark's face burned red. He could barely look up. Wasn't thinking. Jason scoffed. Oh, you were thinking. You just didn't think I was good enough to be in your fancy dealership. Greg turned back to Olivia, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Mrs. Carter, perhaps we can offer you a VIP experience today? A private showing of our finest models? Maybe a discount? Olivia let out a short laugh. You think I care about a discount? The problem isn't the price of your cars. It's the price of your ignorance. She took a slow step forward, looking Greg in the eye. Here's what I want. I want every single employee here to understand that discrimination, especially against young, black men, will not be tolerated. I want this dealership to publicly acknowledge what happened here today. And most of all, she turned to Mark, I want you to look my son in the eye and apologize. Mark hesitated, shifting nervously. Jason tilted his head. What's wrong? Can't say sorry to a kid you disrespected? Greg nudged Mark forward. The salesman swallowed his pride and looked at Jason. I'm sorry. I judged you unfairly. Jason stared at him for a long moment. We'll see if you mean that. Olivia nodded. Good. Now let's talk business. Greg's palms were sweaty. Olivia Carter was not just a billionaire, she was a force to be reckoned with. If she decided to take this incident public, the dealership's reputation could be ruined. Olivia walked toward the showroom's largest display vehicle, a brand new luxury SUV with a six-figure price tag. She ran a hand along the sleek exterior, then turned to Greg. Tell me, Greg, how many of these do you sell in a month? Greg hesitated. This particular model? Maybe 3 or 4, depending on demand, she nodded. And who buys them? People who look like you? Or people like my son? Greg gulped. Mrs. Carter, we don't discriminate against anyone. Olivia held up a hand. Let's not play games. You and I both know that in spaces like this, young black men are rarely seen as serious buyers. You proved that when my son walked in here yesterday. Jason crossed his arms. I wasn't even asking for much. Just wanted to see some cars. Greg forced a smile. We made a mistake. A big one. And we want to make it right. Olivia leaned against the car. Then prove it. Greg frowned. How? She smirked. Sell Jason a car. Treat him like any other high-profile customer. Give him the same level of service you'd give someone walking in with a 7-figure bank account. Mark, who had been silent, finally spoke up. Does he have a driver's license? Jason laughed. Wow. You just can't help yourself, can you? Olivia's eyes turned ice cold. Greg, I suggest you control your staff before I decide to buy this entire dealership just to fire him myself. Greg's heart nearly stopped. Mrs. Carter, please. That won't be necessary. He turned to Jason, his voice overly polite. Mr. Carter, we'd be honored to assist you in selecting a vehicle. Let me personally show you our finest models. Jason smirked. Now that's more like it. Jason could hardly believe it. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been kicked out like a nobody, and now the same people who had dismissed him were scrambling to cater to him. It was almost laughable. Greg led Jason and Olivia toward the dealership's VIP lounge. The room was sleek, with leather seating and complimentary refreshments. A far cry from how Jason had been treated the day before. Please, take a seat, Greg said, forcing a smile. Can I offer you something to drink? Water? Coffee? Olivia waved a hand. We're here for business, not pleasantries. Show my son what you have. Greg nodded quickly and signaled to Mark, who hesitated before pulling out a brochure. He laid it on the table, flipping to the high-end luxury models. These are our best vehicles. We have sports cars, SUVs, and luxury sedans. We also offer customizations if you're looking for something unique. Jason leaned back, studying the pages. So, yesterday, I wasn't even allowed to touch the cars, and now you're rolling out the VIP treatment? That's wild. Greg cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, we deeply regret what happened. It was a misunderstanding. Jason chuckled. A misunderstanding? Right. He turned to his mother. Mom, what do you think? Olivia tapped a manicured finger on the page, then looked up. Jason, if you want a car, pick one. But make sure it's the most expensive one here. Greg's face paled. Of course. We have a luxury model that starts at $300,000. Fully loaded, it's close to $400,000. Jason smirked. I'll take it. Greg blinked. Excuse me, Jason stood up. I said, I'll take it. You have it in stock, right? Mark stammered. Why yes, but, Olivia pulled out her black credit card and placed it on the table. Run it. The entire room fell silent. Mark looked at Greg, who nodded hesitantly. He snatched up the card and rushed off, leaving Greg standing awkwardly. Jason crossed his arms. Crazy how money changes the way people act, huh? Greg forced another smile. Mr. Carter, we truly appreciate your business. Jason leaned in, lowering his voice. Oh, I know you do. Greg watched as Mark rushed to process the payment, his hands shaking. Olivia Carter's black credit card was more than enough to cover the cost of the most expensive car in the dealership. But Greg wasn't just nervous about the sale, he knew this moment was about more than money. It was about power. Jason leaned against the counter, watching Greg closely. So, tell me something, he said, his voice calm but firm. If my mom hadn't walked in here today, would you have ever apologized? Greg's face twitched. Well, of course, Jason shook his head, cutting him off. Nah. You wouldn't have. You only care now because you realized I'm not just some kid off the street. Greg swallowed hard. Mr. Carter, Jason smirked. Relax, man. I'm not mad anymore, just making an observation. Olivia watched the exchange with quiet amusement, letting her son take control of the moment. She had spent years teaching Jason about dignity, self-worth, and knowing when to speak up. Now, he was showing her just how much he had learned. Mark returned a moment later, looking flustered. The payment has been processed. The car is yours, sir. Jason turned to his mother. Mom, what do you think? Should we take it now or have them deliver it? Olivia checked her watch. I think they should deliver it. But before we go, I want to make something clear. She turned to Greg and Mark, her presence commanding. You don't get to decide who is worthy of respect. You turned my son away without knowing anything about him. Do you treat all young black boys like that? Greg paled. No, ma'am. That's not what happened. Olivia cut him off with a sharp glare. It is exactly what happened. And if you think you can get away with that forever, you're wrong. One day, the wrong person will walk in, and it won't just cost you a sale, it will cost you everything. Mark lowered his head, avoiding her gaze. Greg tried to maintain his fake smile, but the sweat on his forehead gave him away. Jason chuckled. Well, I guess that's our cue. Have the car delivered to our house. And next time, try treating people with respect, before you find out who they are. With that, Jason and Olivia turned and walked out, leaving Greg and Mark standing there, speechless. As Jason and Olivia stepped outside, the entire dealership was silent. The other employees, who had been watching the scene unfold, now whispered amongst themselves. Some looked impressed, others ashamed. But Greg and Mark stood frozen, their faces drained of color. The valet quickly pulled up Olivia's Rolls-Royce, its sleek black exterior gleaming under the dealership's bright lights. Jason smirked as he walked past Greg, pausing for a moment. "You see this car?" Jason asked, tapping the hood of the Rolls-Royce. "It's not just about the money. It's about what it represents: respect, dignity, and hard work. You looked at me and thought I didn't deserve to be in your dealership. But the truth is, you never deserved to have me as a customer." Greg swallowed hard. "Jason, I mean, Mr. Carter." Jason waved him off. "Don't bother. I hope you remember this the next time a kid like me walks in here." With that, Jason opened the Rolls-Royce door and slid into the passenger seat. Olivia, already behind the wheel, glanced at him with a proud smile. "Handled that well," she said, starting the car. Jason shrugged. "You taught me well." As they drove off, Jason felt a sense of pride unlike anything he had experienced before. This wasn't just about proving Greg wrong, it was about proving to himself that he deserved to be wherever he wanted to be. Meanwhile, back at the dealership, Greg sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. Mark stood stiffly beside him. "You think they'll tell people about this?" Mark asked nervously. Greg exhaled sharply. "They don't have to. We just made the biggest mistake of our careers." At that moment, the dealership's phone rang. Greg hesitated before answering. "This is Greg, how can I help you?" A deep voice on the other end responded. "This is the corporate office. We need to talk." Greg's face turned pale. He had a feeling this was only the beginning of his troubles. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. What would you have done if you were in James' shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned for more inspiring content. See you in the next one.